All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my session about de-escalating student behavior problems. My name is Wendy Sweeney, and I am the manager for PANDA. PANDA provides disability assistance to adult ed programs across the state of Minnesota. And so I welcome you this afternoon. I hope your conference has been going well. Erin Parker and Miriam Bosveld had a positive behavioral intervention session earlier. So I'm hoping some of you saw that as well, because we tried to coordinate, not duplicating what each of us said. And I will be focusing much more on the de-escalation piece. So I always like to start out by mentioning our website. If you have never been to our website, I would highly encourage you to do so. It was developed for adult basic education teachers and programs for your easy access. We have all kinds of tools in here. We have accessibility options using technology. We have information about accommodations. We have a lot of tools in our forms bar, and then obviously lots of information about various types of disabilities, along with instructional strategies and community resources if you need to refer students out. And I will be showing you some mental health resources a bit later on our website. So these are the topics we're going to be covering here in our short 45-minute session. I'm going to begin by talking about the conflict cycle, what that's all about. Then I will talk about how behaviors tend to serve a function typically. I will also go over the stages of behavior escalation. And then I will be sharing some de-escalation techniques that you can use in your classroom, along with how do you talk to the student after the event, and then those mental resources. So I'd like to start for a minute by asking you to share a student behavior problem that you have experienced. If you just want to chat that out, let's start out with that. Take a few minutes. And Gail, I think you were going to read some of the chats that come through.
Okay, yes, I will. Thank you. Let's see, sneak vaping, latecomers and students monopolizing the conversation, excessive talking, distracting others, laughing at others, using profanity, talking back, adult student who has a problem shouting out the answers even after told not to do so, students getting impatient with others, answering the phone and conversing while in class, students coming late, on their cell phones when should be working, refusing to participate, phone, and that's about it right now.
Okay, that's great. Thank you all for sharing that. I would like you to keep in mind the student that you just mentioned as we go through the remainder of the slides. So let's first start by talking about the conflict cycle. This is typically the cycle that happens. There's a stressful incident that occurs. Now that could be something external, like in the environment, or it could be something internal, maybe something that happened that morning, a fight with a spouse or a car breaking down. And then there's a student reaction to the stress, and the student then will act out in a certain way. And then the teacher will react to the student behavior, not usually knowing the stressful incident or how the student is about to be reacting. So I really want to emphasize this point. The negative approach to handling behaviors is the student is the problem, which I think is really easy to do as a teacher when you're, especially when you have a larger class and you're just noticing the bad behavior and the student is the problem. But I really want to help you try to focus using the positive approach that the student has a problem. So what drives behavior? I know Erin and Miriam touched on this, but I'm going to emphasize it again because I think it's important just to understand behavior doesn't just come out of the sky or just happen for no reason at all. So there are 3 different areas. It's either to get something, such as attention, power, or approval, to avoid or escape something, such as whatever the situation might be, the teacher, maybe teacher's tone of voice, teacher expectation, or classwork. And lastly, to have some control. If they're feeling out of control, they have a real desire to have some control. And it does reduce chaos for them and lessens their anxiety and stress. I want to share a few behavior red flags. Some of these you're probably very well aware of, but just a refresher to kind of thinking about. Some of you mentioned some of these in the chat box, but I think it's always really important to notice, especially a change in behavior. That's a pretty big red flag. But if they're withdrawing and they used to be very chatty, that is a red flag. You want to be talking to the student or expressing your concern. Any procrastinating, not getting things done, being off task, taking frustrations out on others. Somebody mentioned that. That tells me something's going on underneath and they're lashing out at others. Startling easily, that can be a sign of post-traumatic stress disorder. Frequently distracted, just can't seem to focus on anything. Could be a lot of differing reasons. Could be ADHD, could be traumatic brain injury, could just be that they are juggling too much in their lives. Coming late or leaving early. There were a few of you that talked about the coming late, not as much about the leaving early, but coming in late. I had a question from a teacher saying, is it a cultural thing that I have certain students that tend to always arrive late? And it's disruptive and so forth. And I said, yeah, it could be cultural. It could, I mean, there are certain cultures that they don't necessarily pay close attention to what time it is, and they don't think it's a big deal if they come in a few minutes late. And so I think that the tack that I would suggest for especially this one is to, first of all, educate the student about, if you had a job and you were showing up late every day, you would be fired. And I want to help you practice being on time in school, just like you would for a job. So that would be the way I would go about educating them, because they may not know. And oftentimes I think, teachers in adult ed assume that adults know the rules, and clearly they don't. I mean, there's many instances I could share around that. So having those rules and expectations clearly made, I know it's towards the end of the year, but really think about doing that with students at the beginning of the year and posting it on the wall, and then you can be pointing to that if there are late students. And another suggestion for students that come late especially is if you can have a designated area where students have to go. So there's a bit of a consequence. If you're late and we've already started class, you need to sit in this little designated whatever seat, whatever area you might be able to put them, or in the back of the room where they're not going to be interrupting the rest of the class or your teaching, but they can join you as soon as there's a change of subject or a break of some kind. And the last red flag is if there's any alcohol or drug abuse. Now, you may not know this, but if they're, let's say, falling asleep in class a lot, or coming in and you're smelling alcohol on their breath, that's a red flag. So all of these red flags are just for you. If you're noticing these behaviors, it's important to address them privately with the student and saying you're concerned and being very clear about your expectations, or if they need some extra help. possibly mental health challenges going on. So now I want to go through these stages of behavior escalation. So the way to think about escalation is it's tension building. So the tension is slowly building. You may not be aware of some of that tension until the behavior, but I want to talk about each one of these so you can be more aware and be on the lookout. So starting with the calm, the first thing would be a trigger. A trigger could be so many different things. It could be a loud noise. It could be a smell. It could be the tone of voice. It could be what somebody says to them. It could be a confrontation or a memory or something that happened before they came into school. Those are all triggers. So that just is a tension that just automatically puts a person into the fight or flight mode. The next one is the one so you may or may not be aware of the trigger, obviously, but the agitation is really the key that we're going to focus on as we move forward here. Is the agitation is what I want you to be very much aware of. And what I mean by agitation is, so there's the trigger, you may not know or see it, but usually when there's a trigger, the student's going to start becoming uncomfortable. And that's what I mean by agitation. They're either going to kind of start looking frustrated. They may, say something, blurt something. They might look nervous. They might be off task. They could be jumpy or restless, but there's a clear agitation starting. They may get up out of their seat. Any of those could be agitation. And this is the point to de-escalate before it goes further, because if it's not, then the students feeling more tension, they're not getting resolution on whatever that trigger was, and they're starting to feel threatened. So it does accelerate. And so then, that might be when you notice it too, where they, start pacing, or they, start, saying something to students or being rude or whatever it might be. That accelerating, that tension is building and building. And then it peaks, because it all comes out. It always does. It doesn't just stop. There's a peak, and the peak is the lashing out. So they're releasing the tension at that peak moment. So when they release that tension, they might yell at you or another student. They might throw something. They might toss a chair. They may slam a door. So there's that I think oftentimes, especially if you're in a busy classroom, you may only see the peak, and then it's alarming. And then you go into fight or flight, because you're like, wait, what is this dangerous? What's going on? So that's why I like to tell you the stages here. And so after that peak happens, there is a de-escalation for the student. And it's important to know this. It takes 20 to 30 minutes. When you get upset about something, think about when you've had a fight with your spouse, or you've gotten angry about some situation that you're passionate about. Your body does take about 20 to 30 minutes just to calm itself down, both your body and your mind, because when you are upset, your emotions just take over. So your rational brain is just napping. It's not in operation. So that de-escalation takes about 20, 30 minutes. And then the student might feel confused. They might withdraw. They might blame somebody else for what happened, or they might minimize the situation. And then the last stage is recovery. And by that, this is when the student kind of realizes, okay, maybe the 30 minutes is ended. Now they might feel shame and embarrassment or guilt for losing control. Okay, so those are the stages of behavior escalation. So let's talk about, what do you do about it? So I want to mention a few positive behavior interventions. The first is, like I mentioned, just paying attention to those escalating behaviors, and that can be tricky. just noticing, if you can start noticing the agitation. I'm going to be sharing some nonverbal ways to redirect behavior. But you always want to stay calm. You don't want to buy into their stress. And so then let's try to redirect. So let's go to that screen. So I think it's really important to emphasize that 65% of how we communicate with each other is nonverbal. Isn't that amazing? I just think that's so interesting. Tone of voice, how close you stand to somebody, if you touch somebody or not, the way you say things, they can be interpreted differently. So I want to share some methods that you can try. You may be aware of these, but I'm just going to point these out. This is what I would suggest when a student is agitating. If you can catch them before they're losing their cool, I think these methods can work well. So the first is planned ignoring. So, if the student isn't causing any threats or anything to anybody, maybe it can be ignored if it's, tapping a pencil in the class, for instance. So there's 3 questions you need to ask in order to think about, like, do I even want to give any attention to this or just ignore it? Are you able to teach? Are the other students able to learn? And is the student in question able to learn? If the answer is yes to all of these, it's picking your battles. Is it worth doing or saying anything at this point? So if it's a one-time situation, this would be a perfect thing to do. Another way that you can use a nonverbal method is what's called preventative cueing. And basically, that's just giving a cue to the student. And this would have to be decided in private between you as the teacher with the student on, hey, I'm noticing you're blurting out in class. And, this is, disruptive to the students. And, I want to help you with this. And tell me what would help you. Make them part of that solution. But something like pulling your ear. So if the student blurts out again, you pull your ear, or you go over and you touch the desk, or whatever cue you want to come up with, so you're not embarrassing them, but you're reminding them this needs, to stop and help them refocus. And then the last one I want to mention is just proximity control. So, let's say somebody answers their cell phone, and that's the rule in your house. You can, a preventative cueing, you could point to the rule on the board, but proximity control, you could continue teaching, but walking closer to the student and, letting them know, like, yeah, that's not appropriate, without saying any words at all. Those are methods I'm suggesting in situations that are annoying, but not in any way feeling threatened, or the student's not out of control necessarily. If there is that acceleration to the peak and you're noticing it at whatever point, the things you need to keep in mind is don't touch them, because it will make them feel more threatened. Avoid continuous eye contact, again, because it will make them feel more threatened. And don't reason or argue with the student. Like I mentioned earlier, their rational brain is gone. If they're to that point where they're in that acceleration or that peak, anything you say to them isn't going to be even digested, and it might actually increase it and make it worse. Speak clearly and simply in a calm, low tone, and give them a choice. You want them to have some control, at least initially. Do you want to take a break, or you want to count to 10? If the student continues to escalate, then you need to firmly tell them they need to leave the room. And if they still are, acting out, that's when you do absolutely need to seek some help. I know there was a situation that was shared with me about a prior student who came into class and started making really inappropriate comments and making threatening remarks, and they didn't know what to do. So they called 911. And I said, that's exactly what you should have done, is call 911. In that situation where students are feeling threatened, you're feeling threatened, that's just not acceptable. It's okay to call 911. But I also want to encourage you to check with your program's policies around poor behavior. Do you have somebody on staff who can sit down and work things out with the student? Do you have, program policy rules or expectations that the students sign prior to enrolling in the class? Because that can always be something you can go back to if they do anything threatening or inappropriate. So those kinds of things I think are important to check on. The last thing I wanted to mention before we go on to this is, if your program has a space, I think it would be ideal if there were a place that students could regularly go when they're feeling stressed or they're needing a break, a comfortable little area in your program, if that's a possibility, that you could direct them to, or they could take on their own when they need it. So now I'm going to show you a short video. It's about a minute long. And this is in a high school, so it's not going to look exactly like an adult education program. Couldn't find anything like that. Of course, it's harder to find adults in situations, but so it might be a little exaggerated for adult ed, but maybe not. I don't know. Just wanting to show it. And then I'm going to ask a few questions. So let's just watch it first.
What if you could do SEO smarter and faster? With Wix, you can edit your meta tags page by page or all in.
Caleb, cool it. Okay, everyone, I need you to get your papers out from yesterday. Those need to be on your desk. Caleb, if you do not have yours out, that will be a 0 for this assignment. Caleb, I am not going to play these games with you today. Pick up the paper or go to the office. Pick it up. Caleb, I don't know what your problem is, but you will not be disruptive in my class. Do you understand what I'm saying?
What y'all looking at?
That's it. To the office. Out.
Okay, I hope you guys could all hear that and see it. For some reason, I couldn't put on a full screen when it was on, and I meant to put closed captioning as well. So hopefully you all got to see that. So if you would like to just share in the chat box, or if you want to raise your hand, what did the teacher do wrong here?
I said several things. Let's see. Somebody said engaged, tone of voice, too much confrontation. The teacher didn't acknowledge I've lost it. Hold on a second. Let's see. The teacher didn't acknowledge what he did, that he did what she asked, which was to pick up the paper. The teacher started getting on his case immediately. There was aggression. The teacher badgered the student. Teacher reacted quickly. The tone was immediately confrontational. She acted like the student was the problem and escalated the behavior. didn't let the student respond. The teacher was confrontational even after Caleb did what she asked and made a choice and picked up the paper. They were shouting, the teacher wasn't calm.
All right,
Teachers
okay,
and
that's
more.
great.
There's
We'll
lots
stop
more great
there.
comments.
We'll stop there, but oh gosh, you guys, very good. I know, it was almost uncomfortable watching that teacher. What about the student? What did you notice when he started escalating or showing more agitation? Like, we could see the agitation in the beginning, but at what point did his behavior escalate?
Someone said, I agree the teacher's behavior was more disruptive than the student,
Yes.
which I think is, he walked and something was bothering him.
Okay, all good. So let's move on to, now we're going to watch one more video. This is Shane. And so we're gonna all watch it together, and then we're gonna be putting you guys into a breakout. And these are the questions I want you to ask, similar. So this is a different scenario. What the teacher did wrong, what was going on with the student, and how you would have handled de-escalating the student based on what you've learned so far. So let's watch this one.
Okay, take out your math books, turn to page 47, please. Look at problem number 1. Shane, would you take out your math book, turn to page 47? Shane, would you work that problem for me? Who'd like to work it? Okay. Okay, nice work. Problem 2. Shane.
I don't even know what page we're on.
We're on page 47. Why don't you have a seat in the back of the room? With your math book. Who'd like to work problem 2? Anybody? Okay. Is that correct, Shane? Shane, is that correct? Hey, we're not going to go on until you answer me. Is it correct?
I'm not playing your stupid game.
Excuse me, I need you to have a seat. Shane, don't walk away from me. Shane.
Okay, I apologize. For some reason, again, I couldn't put a full screen on that video, so you only saw like mainly Shane. So we could put this YouTube video into your breakout room if you want to try to watch it again. But I just want you to get together and talk about this situation. If you have time, you can talk about some of your own situations. I think it's always great when teachers get together and talk with each other about challenging behaviors. So Gail, I think you're going to put them in for, are we doing like 8 minutes?
Yes, 7 minutes with a 1-minute countdown. So go ahead and stay in your room and you'll come back automatically.
Okay,
Go
great.
ahead and open those, Wendy.
I'm
Okay,
sorry, what?
all right.
Yeah, we're ready.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some good discussion in your breakouts. So let's try this again, similar to what we did on the initial video, is what did the teacher do wrong in this situation? If you just want to share in the chat, that would be fabulous.
Let's see, someone says they didn't stay calm. There was touching. He did everything on the avoid list. He picked on the student. He could have ignored the student. The kid was clearly having a hard time, and the teacher kept picking on the student. The teacher was creating the escalation.
Agreed. I think that that is so right on, that teacher. So it's really kind of a lesson in what not to do, but because you could see that student getting more and more and more tense. When did you notice the student escalating before the peak? Anybody notice that?
I don't see anything in the chat quite yet. The teacher kept asking, can you answer that? After the teacher asked him to move, that's when he started. When the student was asked to move to the back of the room, the slamming of the book when he was asked to move back.
Yes, I think that was exactly when he was already agitated, but once the teacher actually escalated that behavior by making him move and then get your book, I mean, he was just on him. So now I'd like you to chat out. How would you have gone about dealing with Shane and his agitation? Any chats coming in?
Yep, here they come. Okay, someone said ignored his behavior and focus on the other students. Someone said my team talked about the relationship, previous experiences that led up to these kinds of poor behaviors on the part of the teacher. We're all human, but we need to check ourselves as much as we ask our students to check themselves. In fact, we might have more responsibility to do so as the teachers and leaders. Someone said left him alone and maybe speak to him later. I would have ignored his behavior. I would have left him alone for a bit and let him get settled into class before calling on him. Maybe call on students willing to volunteer to model good behavior. Give him space. I may have allowed him to be alone. I would have had the class work and have a private conversation about what was bothering him. More ignored his behavior. Give one directive, then ignore. I would have tried to ignore. He wasn't causing problems until called out.
Okay, that's great.
And there's lots more.
There's lots more. Okay, well, we'll move forward, but I appreciate all your feedback, and I agree with all that you had come up with. They could have easily ignored, that teacher could have easily ignored Shane's behavior. And it's so important you don't embarrass a student in front of other students. That will very much escalate behavior. So it's always best to be private, and we're going to be talking about that next. So let's talk about the recovery. So an instance, let's just say we'll use Shane as the example. The way to have some resolution with Shane would be to schedule a time to meet with him privately when he is home. So it's not in front of students. It's not, you'd want to take some time after class or the next day. You may not be able to do it that day if they're still clearly upset. And then before you meet with the student, I think it's really important to analyze what happened here. If you do a little bit of work on what happened, I think the meeting will go much smoother. And so the ABCs I'm going to go over right now. If you haven't heard of that before, you may or may not have. First for A is antecedent. So what happened prior to the student acting out? It's that, what was the trigger? What was going on? Again, it can be internal or external. So you're not always going to know what's going on in their minds or what may have triggered them, but looking back at before the student had a problem, what was going on in the environment? What was going on in class? Was there a lot of confusion and chaos at the time? Was it a quiet moment? Really kind of looking at, could I have somehow participated unknowingly, or was there a commotion or anything like that? So just kind of guessing. You may not know, but you can analyze what was going on in your class at the time. And then the behavior, like, what they do in response to what happened. So what actually happened? Was the behavior positive or was it negative? Sometimes behaviors can be positive in a certain way, and a lot of times they're negative. And then what is it you want to change? So really being clear of like, what's going to be the outcome of our meeting. I want to make it clear that we come up with a plan to change the behavior you don't want to be seeing anymore. And then the last is the consequences. What happened after the student behaved poorly? Like with Shane, the teacher grabbed his arm and he went out and he slammed the door. What happened? What was your reaction? What was the student's reaction? What occurred in the environment after the behavior? How did the other students react? Did the student gain any attention, approval, or control? Those things that direct behavior, which one might it have been? So we've talked about some nonverbal strategies. We've talked about some other de-escalation techniques. And now I want to talk about the resolution, like having that meeting with the students. So once you plan a meeting with the student, you want to plan for it in a few different ways. During that meeting, you want to provide a safe, trusting, and supportive environment. You don't know what might have been going on with the student unless you do know, but you probably will benefit from getting more information from the students. You want them to feel comfortable and show some concern. Hey, I'm concerned about what happened in class the other day. Can you tell me what did you see happen, or tell me your point of view. So then you can get more information about, well, geez, I got in a car accident on the way to class. I was really on edge. Or I got in a fight with my spouse, or, the student next to me kept bugging me, or, whatever. You want to know their point of view. And then validate them. Oh man, that had to be really tough for you. I'm so sorry that happened. What can I do to help you? So, we can prevent this from happening next time, and have them be a part of the plan. Like, what is it I can do to help you stay in control, keep that behavior managed and under control. And then making a plan for those future tension triggers. What can I do to help get that student's input? And then let's come up with a plan so that I can give you a non-verbal cue to remind you need to take a break, or to remind you you are not to blurt out in class, whatever it might be. So having that plan, so it's just between you and the student, I think can be pretty powerful. And then you also want to remind them of things they can do to calm themselves down, using that as a time to educate them about, when you're having a trigger like that, if you start doing these things right away, it could help calm your mind and your body. Calming strategies such as deep breathing, something you can do without anybody knowing. I always recommend 6-2-4. There's all kinds of deep breathing different ways of deep breathing out there, but I do the 6-2-4, which you breathe in for a count of 6, hold for 2, out for 4, and you do it at least 5 times. So that really can help calm people down, or counting to 10 or taking that break. Any one of those are some calming strategies. And then, of course, if needed, if they're struggling with they may be struggling with something in their home, you can recommend United Way 211. They can help with all of those kinds of resources, or if they need any mental health resources. This would be a time to I just want you to have this, and would encourage you to seek them out. And so I want to mention a few ways to help. There's so many options, and there's so many free things that your students can access. I know many of them don't have insurance, or they have limited funding. And so it's I always am looking for free or reduced fee services that are available out there. And there's quite a few. There's several 24/7 free hotlines. Anyone can call. They have translators on many of these hotlines. There's the new suicide and crisis lifeline. So it's not just suicide, it's also crisis, which I was very happy to see. That just came out last July. It's now 988. So it's very easy to remember, just like 911, but 988. And that's 24/7. Again, they have 150 translators available. A third one I want to make you aware of that many people aren't is there are mental health crisis response teams that are available in every county across the state of Minnesota. So the only key is to find the number of the crisis response team in your county. But what they do is they provide 24/7. A team of mental health providers will come to a person's house, to the school, to work, and do an evaluation and intervention with the individual. So that might be an easier way and less threatening way to deal with a student that's having a mental health crisis rather than calling 911. So that I want you to be aware of that option. And then I have several free or sliding fee scale therapy clinics on our website, and then always 911 as a reminder. But I want to take you into our website for a second to show you where to find a printable mental health handout that you could have available in your classroom or on your desk or in the hall. You could set it on a table for students to grab if they want. It's very easy to find. You just go to pandamn.org, then you go to the mental health category that's on the right hand side. I don't know why this is not popping up. And then you go to resources. So going to PANDA, here we go. Okay. So I have it linked directly to the resource page, but just to remind you, you go down to the mental health here that lights up when you touch it, then you go to resources. So here I have the 24/7 crisis lines right at the top of the page, easy to access. Here's the mental health crisis response teams. And if you click on the click here, it brings up every number throughout Minnesota by county. So if you want to find that number for your county and have it handy, that's where you find it. All kinds of, domestic violence hotlines, Trevor Project, United Way, again, they can answer all kinds of questions for you, Veteran Line. So this is where I wanted to mention at the bottom of the 24/7 is if you click on this, click here for a printable list of mental health resources. It's a Word document that comes up and you can print. We also have a mental health tip sheet that we have been giving out to a lot of programs. We put this out at the Crystal Learning Center in Robbinsdale, where PANDA's office is housed. We put out a table, and this comes in several different languages about staying mentally well and healthy. And it just gives 10 easy tips, something you can have available in your program. And then the rest of these are low cost or sliding fee, most of them. And I have Metro and also Greater Minnesota. If you know of something and you don't see it in our website, please let me know and we will add it. Okay, so now this is your chance to ask some specific questions. I think we have a few minutes left here. How much time do we have, Gail?
Well, actually, Wendy, we've gone over. So,
yeah.
yeah, and the affinity group starts at 3:15. So, if people want to stay, they can, but if they need to leave, I think that would be fine too. If you want to
Okay,
answer
I'm so
questions
sorry. I
for
thought
her.
we had a few more minutes. And then I also want to let you know, I have a handout that I think Gail was going to put in the chat box. And it's also in the participant folder. Is that right, Gail?
Yes,
about de-escalation.
Yes, in the participant folder, they can find it. Mhm.
Yeah, so basically, if you just want to print that up, it's pretty much sums up everything I talked about today. Okay, so I'm sorry, we don't have time for the questions, but if you do have any questions, you can certainly email me. The easiest thing to remember is just to email panda@ardale.org. So panda@ardale, Robbinsdale, ardale.org comes right to my inbox. If you have any specific students you want to talk further about, or you have some questions that you would like answered, certainly feel free to reach out to me.